You're watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for joining me on another edition of Inside Automotive right here at cbtnews.com. After what is expected to be a successful first quarter of new vehicle sales, a major curveball has been has really been thrown at the industry. So the industry is now on edge a little bit, but joining us now is Jessica Caldwell, Head of Insights at Edmunds.com. Thank you, Jessica, for joining us once again on the show.
Always good to be here, Jim. Thank you for having me.
Good. So let's start with the first quarter. Edmunds is forecasting that Q1 for 2025 will be the strongest first quarter of new vehicle sales since 2021. What were the biggest factors driving this?
Yeah, things look really good in the first quarter. I mean, I think the fundamentals mostly drove what would be a good sales result. We had inventory in a pretty good place. I mean, not pre-2019 levels. It wasn't over 4 million, but I think in a good place for where sales rates are. We had incentives be fairly decent. Again, not earth-shattering incentives, but they were out there. Consumers were happy to find them. And I think that also at the end of the quarter, we got a little bump by the tariff announcements. So it wasn't a long period of time here, but we did have a kind of a strong finish to the end of March because people were kind of coming in, seeing if they could buy a car before the tariffs begin.
Yeah, I would second that. A number of the dealers that I talked to have said the last week has been very brisk, to say the least. And while dealers were not screaming it in the showroom that it was tariffs that drove them in there, these dealers had a feeling as though that was probably a big factor, right? So.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of been, consumers probably been a bit confused up to this point, but I think mid last week when the announcement was made, it became very, very clear as to what was happening. And if these tariffs are enacted, then I think people wanted to be probably err on the side of safe rather than sorry and having to pay whatever it may be, because I think that's really the X factor, is that what will it do to prices? And I imagine it will look different for every vehicle, every brand. Right,
for sure. How have incentives evolved?
Well, I mean, during the semiconductor shortage, we didn't really see a lot of incentives. In fact, MSRP incentives transaction prices were higher than MSRP.
Yeah.
And that is slowly kind of creeping back. And we're starting to see more incentives into the fold. I mean, we don't see the 0% for 72 offers. That's still fairly rare. And if it happens, it's for people with very high credit. But we do start to see some finance because that's really going to help drive sales, because we know that interest rates are high. They're over 7% for new vehicles, over 11% for used on average. So anything that you can offer in that regard, I think really helps the consumer message, because most people are financing their vehicles. They want to stretch the payments out so they can get something that they like, something that's nice with all the amenities.
Right.
So those, are generally looked upon favorably. But, again, they're out there. They're just not everywhere like they once were.
Right. And you're right. People are extending these terms. Dealers are extending the terms. I mean, 72 and 84 months is almost standard now, which is just incredible. You put the tariff on top of that and high interest rates. What are your concerns on that? What do you think we'll see as a result?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of affordability concerns out there. And I think if you look at who's buying new vehicles today, it's a very different person than who was buying them 20 years ago, because income levels now are much higher.
Yeah.
Transaction prices have risen 29% in the past 5 years. And then you add tariffs on top of that. What would happen on that? I mean, I'm not saying that all tariffs are going to be 25% extra cost, but any cost, I think. So I think what we'll see is that we'll have new vehicles continue to cater to folks with higher income levels. And then everyone else is kind of relegated to the used car market, which makes it an interesting dynamic there and a little bit different as well. But, we're already hearing talks of some vehicles on the lower end going away because of tariffs. There's talks about Mercedes, their GLA going away. I don't know if we'll hear more of that.
Yeah.
But considering that so many have gone away already in the subcompact and compact space and will continue through the next year before tariffs were an issue, I do wonder what is sort of left in this space for those people that are, kind of coming out of college. You leave college and you get that first car. It's generally something smaller, something cheap. Doesn't feel like that really exists in a lot of places anymore.
I know. Yeah. Especially with no sedans or fewer sedans on the market. Talk to us about, you mentioned used cars. This tariff situation has immediately put the pressure on the pricing and the acquisition of used cars, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's right. I mean, just like we saw in the semiconductor shortage, when there are price differences on the new car market, people flock to the used, and we'll probably see something similar here as well. People will think, oh, I'll skirt the system, I'll buy a used vehicle, no tariff there. And that will just spike demand and also prices as well. And it is interesting too, because they haven't really worked out all the details on how the part tariff is going to work. It seems like the Commerce Secretary is still doing work in that space, but that's really going to affect all ownership as well. I mean, you have anyone that's coming in to repair their vehicle, even dealers doing reconditioning on used vehicles that are coming in.
Sure.
I imagine that those costs will come up. Obviously, insurance, it really is across the whole ownership chain that we'll see a difference, especially if the parts become, more defined.
Right. Will you guys at Edmunds change your forecast on the SAR for the year based on the fact that we're going to be seeing tariffs now?
It's a bit tough to do just because we don't know the longevity. I think if that was set in stone, because there just feels like there's so much conflicting information, like will it actually even happen is one?
Sure.
Will it last for a week, for 2 weeks, a month? Because if it lasts for the entire year or entire next few years, that is a very different scenario than lasting a month or two.
Yeah.
And will the automakers come to the table with favorable plans that will eliminate the tariffs? I mean, that still is sort of the big question.
Yeah, for sure. A number of the dealers that I've spoken to over the last couple of weeks, surprisingly, as I mentioned to you before we were recording, are surprisingly like in Trump's corner on this tariff situation, which I thought originally, it would be, what are you doing, Trump? But really, they've said, I've heard comments like, well, this had to happen, and this is what we put him in office for, and we knew the tariffs were going to come, and we'll get through it, just like we did with COVID, and we got through it. With the recession, back in 2008, 2009. And this is just one more thing for dealers to deal with and things will be okay. And I was surprised to hear that from so many dealer principals out there that really seem to be supporting these moves by the president.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I think that the dealers out there, I mean, they've been incredibly resilient because we used to have this term like, a black swan event would come along every, decade or 2 decades or lifetime. And now I feel like there's a black swan event like every few months.
This
is unprecedented. Okay, well, here we go again. So I do imagine that there is that sentiment. And at the end of the day, a lot of dealers are, they're business owners. They know how to adapt and adjust to make the best situation for themselves.
That's right.
So I definitely see it. And I think a lot of people, obviously they agree with the reshoring concept. And I can obviously see that sentiment as well. It just seems like the timeline is a bit harsh because cars are not simple and we want them to be made well. We want them to be made safe.
Right.
And I don't want any factory being put up quickly in haste.
That's true too.
Try to make these plans. So, I'm not sure if it's a situation where any automaker can come to the table and say they're going to change anything in the short term. It just doesn't happen that way in the auto space. If there's maybe a 5, 10, 15-year plan, seems like something like that would be, maybe more acceptable.
That's right. I mentioned one dealer, he's got 30 dealerships, and I said, you'd think that it would be better if Trump did this over a period of time, like he phased the different levels in of the tariff over the next 18 months or something. He goes, that's not Trump. That's not why we put him in office. Rip the Band-Aid off and let's be done with this already. So I thought that was an interesting take, but there's so many people that agree with him.
I mean, but think about the auto companies though. If there's a tariff on all parts that come across the border, vehicles, it's like they have been with NAFTA for decades now, and that's how they have essentially set up their businesand so to go and change that is quite challenging. Like I said, this can't be done overnight. So, sure, ripping the Band-Aid off is good, but again, not when you are investing millions of dollars into these factories and have to move them, and maybe it may change again in 3 years' time when there's a new election, and then what do you do? It's like it's definitely tough. I'm glad I'm not doing the pricing strategy or any of this at an automaker because I imagine they've had a lot of sleepless nights. And
it's very funny to see Sean Fain be a supporter of Trump now, where he was a supporter of the Democrats for so long because of the unions, but now he's going, wait a minute, this could be a very good thing for our UAW, right? You got all these factories that are going to be theoretically hiring union workers, right?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, they definitely had strong words for each other before the election happened. So
yes, they did.
It is definitely a 180 that we are seeing. But obviously something like, more factories in the U.S. is going to benefit the UAW. So
that's right.
He's all for it. But again, it just feels like from a realistic strategic plan, it needs to happen over a period of time, not in 30 days.
I know. It is a little shocking to say the least. No question about it. Jessica Caldwell, Head of Insights at Edmunds.com. Thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Love getting an update from you. I know that our subscribers and viewers get a lot out of your visit with us. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Always a good chat. Thanks.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks for watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick. The tariff conversation just got real, and nobody covers it like CBT News. From deep dive analysis to exclusive interviews with top voices like Senator Bernie Moreno, we've got the full picture. Want to know what's happening, what it means, and what's next? There's only one place to go: CBTnews.com.